All right, we're going to get started for my talk, which is going to be a little bit of a shifting gears from what we've been talking about and have had presenters speak about. So when Daniela, who, by the way, congratulations to Daniela and Erica for this incredible event. It's been really a pleasure and an honor to be here. So when Daniela sort of asked me to speak today at the HackATOM in Seoul, I was reflecting on sort of being in this position, sort of, building in Cosmos. Maybe you're a beginner, maybe you've been around for a while, but I was reflecting on sort of all of the organizations, all of the entities that come together and really end up building all of this incredible technology and all of these systems that, as end users, maybe we don't fully sort of know kind of who is behind. And so understanding that there's a lot of human organizations, a lot of entities building this technology, I was reflecting on sort of, as a participant in this HackATOM, how would I, if I was a participant, build my career in Cosmos? How would I launch my career in Cosmos? So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Hopefully these are some useful practical lessons and something that can help you really take off in Cosmos, build an incredible career, and really succeed. So I'll first start off by introducing who I work for, the company that I represent. So I work for Informal Systems. We're a core developer of Cosmos. We're a research and development organization. Most of our team is technical. I would say about 80 to 90% of our team, either researcher or engineer. I work on the non-technical side in product development, marketing, go-to-market, business development, things like this, really helping to bring the products, the technology that we build to market and to a wider group of users. So very briefly, we work across 3 dimensions. So first, we do build applications that maybe aren't as much user-facing, but they are very much used by technologists and engineers to improve the quality and security of their systems. One example is Appalachi, a model checker that we also leverage in our audits to prove the correctness of the technology that we build. We also run infrastructure, so we build and operate nodes and relaying software to power the Interchain. My colleague Dan earlier talked a little bit about Hermes, the relayer that has become widely adopted for relayer operators. We also run a validator called Cephalopod. Cephalopod is active across many networks, including the Cosmos Hub, including the Regen Network, Osmosis, and others. And then lastly, but definitely not last in importance, is the Cosmos Hub. So we develop features for the Cosmos Hub to serve the Interchain in a sustainable way. So one of those features that I'm working on is Interchain security. It is the next sort of phase, evolution of the Cosmos Hub, if you will, that will really build out the Hub as this application deployment environment, really help app chains scale, launch securely, efficiently, and things like this. So that is who the organization that I'm representing today. But instead of talking about Informal's work or again some of the things that I mentioned that we work on, we're going to talk about building your career in Cosmos. And again, hopefully this is useful information. And so let's begin. So I'm going to start off by introducing myself. I do think that when we talk about kind of career development and launching your career, it's important to kind of understand the motivations and the reasons why we take on the roles that we do. So a little bit about me. I started off at Informal about two and a half years ago. I've always been fascinated with systems in transition, to put it bluntly. So in university, I studied political science, economics, and actually did quite a lot of field research in post-conflict societies. To me, post-conflict societies and actually societies that are still undergoing conflict sort of represent, a really, kind of perfect case study, if you will, of what happens when things break down, when trust, communication, and really when social bonds break down. And so throughout my studies and even through my work, I had the opportunity to do field research. So for example, I conducted a field research project in the Balkans during the Syrian refugee crisis, really understanding how, in the absence of institutional support in the absence of governmental support, what happens when communities have to self-organize, when they have to come together and provide the care and the resources and the support that is needed to transition out of those horrible depraved situations. So that was ultimately my motivation, from as a young child, as a student, starting my career. I was always interested in this ideas of community self-organizing, which really does kind of play a role into the motivations and things that I will sort of ask of you who's considering building your career in Cosmos to kind of reflect on. What are these motivations? What are these concerns that you hold so deeply, so dearly, that motivate you to take these risks, build your career, in a way that makes sense for you philosophically, personally, emotionally, professionally, and so on. And so this was really a lot of my motivation in university, again, in my career. How do communities self-organize? How do these grassroots efforts take shape? When do they succeed? When do they fail? And how do we get out of these sort of transitory moments? And so that took me to a more, let's say, formal sort of organization, or a more formal role in the realm of political advocacy. So after I completed this field research, had a couple of roles where I was working in more of these post-conflict sort of scenarios. I came back domestically, back to Canada, where I'm from, and was very interested in political advocacy. So I worked for an organization, an industry association, which represented business interests in Canada, specifically technology companies, and was really advocating with the government at that time on how do we effectively make sure that smaller companies, smaller tech companies, are of an equal footing as larger tech companies, the Facebooks, the Googles, the big tech companies. And so again, there were similar motivations, although the role was very different, and it was a different context, it was a different, let's say, mission. It was a very similar sort of desire or motivation, which was how do we effectively communicate in this case, a minority interest, or at least an interest that wasn't as powerful or, well regarded as something like, the Google lobby or the Facebook lobby in Canada. And so, really working with a small team, working, in a very agile, fast-paced environment, we were able to effectively lobby the government for these interests, and that's really how. That was actually my last role before I got into the web3, the crypto space, full time. So we're going to go into a little bit of a thought exercise, a moment of reflection, for all of you that I really encourage you to kind of think about. But for me, ultimately, what I realized before I sort of, jumped headfirst into crypto and Web3 was, blockchains, as I was, studying them, reading the Bitcoin white paper, starting to go to Meetup, starting to, meet people that were dedicating, their career to this, I realized, blockchains are in fact political economies themselves. They're obviously, incredibly technical, systems that, require a lot of, engineering work. They require a lot, standardization frameworks. They, there are a lot of technical considerations, of course, but at the end of the day, these are political economies that will, in one way, shape, or form, for years to come, influence the way we think about economic relationships, the way we think about probably political organization, political organizing, and so that was kind of the epiphany that I had personally, going from university, studying, post-conflict societies, political science, economics, into my career of political advocacy. It was my realization at that time that blockchains are political economies. This is where I want to be, and I've been very happy ever since. So. That's a little bit about me, but I do want to throw out a few questions, a few things to consider to all of you that are looking to land your first role in Cosmos specifically, and hopefully this will help you navigate this very complicated ecosystem. If we're being honest. So, landing your first role in Cosmos. So there are three things that I think everyone should actually ask themselves whether or not you're looking to join to build your career in the cosmos or elsewhere, but one is how do I want to work? Why do I want to work, and where do I want to work? We'll look at these 3 questions in order, and we'll apply them to the Cosmos ecosystem. So first, so a career in Cosmos. There are a few ways that these questions could be answered. So how do I want to work? There's obviously many ways of contributing, of starting your career. I mean, being here is obviously one way to sort of kickstart this process, but there's different ways. One, in terms of the how, is open source contributions, applying for grants, becoming a full-time employee, a contractor. This is really the structure of how you would work day to day. Some people prefer more of a kind of regimented, formalized schedule. Other people are very comfortable with being independent, not having to work within a traditional corporate structure. So the how is really about how you think about your place of work, the environment, your day to day. It's very a practical consideration. The why is where it gets interesting. From my opinion, because this is where we start to kind of consider the motivations, more of like the philosophical sort of thinking behind what motivates you personally to do the things you do. Our time is precious. There's always trade-offs when we decide to take a certain path. So some examples, in Cosmos specifically, why do I want to work? Maybe you're motivated by mass adoption. You could have any, maybe any role, or at least the role itself isn't super important, but you care about the outcome, the objective, right? So you really care about the technology. Maybe you care about the, philosophy, and you're just interested in seeing this be, adopted in the real world. People are using it. You care that there's activity, there is interaction, engagement with the technology itself, and so that's why you're interested in a specific role. Maybe you just really care about solving technical problems. Hopefully, obviously, these technical solutions result in mass adoption, but maybe the motivation is just being an expert in your field, being solving hard problems, hard to find bugs, and that's your motivation. Or maybe it's actually more sociopolitical. Again, maybe it's just something that motivates you from more of a philosophical angle. So these are just examples, when you start to consider, why do I want to, have a specific role? Why do I want to even be active in the Cosmos ecosystem in the first place? You start to consider, some of these things. And obviously this list is not exhaustive. There's many reasons why you would want a certain role, but these are just sort of some examples that come to my mind, at least. And then a career in Cosmos. So obviously, Cosmos is this ever-expanding internet of blockchains with many different entities, companies, individuals, projects, all working towards this vision of an internet of blockchains as a sovereign, interoperable ecosystem of many app chains communicating, transacting with each other, which resembles quite like the internet of today. And so where to work is definitely a big question. Similar to the internet of today, there is no one internet company. There are many internet companies, and it's similar in Cosmos. There's no one Cosmos organization. There's no one Cosmos company. There are many organizations. And so after sort of asking yourself these questions, how do I want to work? Why do I want to work? Hopefully you get closer to the where. You find your organization, you find your people, your tribe, your project that really motivates you, inspires you to carry out your best work. And so In Cosmos, there are many different layers of organizations. This visualization of map of zones, it has come up, many times throughout this hackathon in different presentations, different contexts. And in my context, for this presentation, it represents actually one layer of organizational structures, right? So if you think of individual layer ones, individual app chains, they themselves represent at least a collection of organizations that all work in service of those layer ones, of those app chains. So this is one layer, but I would argue this is a very abstract layer that doesn't really get to the core of, kind of the entity or the organization or again, the group of people that are really responsible for stewarding and shepherding these projects. So there's layers and layers underneath this sort of visualization that, again, in my opinion, is still quite abstract and doesn't really get to the human sort of core of, what is kind of happening behind the scenes to make this a reality. And so there's different, sources, resources in the community on, core contributors, different entities working, again, in service of these different projects. There's no one canonical sort of frame of reference because the Cosmos and the different organizations contributing to the Cosmos are ever expanding. I mean, even this weekend there will probably, if I had to bet, be a new company or a new organization or a new entity that is formed around a project. But this is just one example that also, I think, represents like a really great ethos in Cosmos, which is, independent contributions and resources and research which can be put into the community, updated in an ongoing fashion that just, represent, a snapshot or at least a state of how things currently are. Thank you. And so here, specifically, this is a core contributors, specifically core contributors for Cosmos and the Cosmos Hub. So these are organizations which work to shepherd a lot of the technology that the Cosmos Hub is shipping. And this was actually put together by an independent community member, put together by someone that was just really passionate about the ecosystem and just wanted to put out a lot more knowledge and education on where the activity is happening. So, as I mentioned, there's a lot of complexity, I think, when you kind of enter Cosmos. There's different layers of organizations. I mentioned there's like this abstract sort of notion of all the different app chains, that are represented in map of zones, connected via IBC. And so how do you navigate that complexity? How do you, as somebody that is interested in, building your career in Cosmos, working full-time, working, long, for many people, long hours. How do you navigate this complexity? How do you make the right decision for yourself on where to build your career? So I would argue there's, 2-3 sort of approaches to how you think about navigating this complexity. And it really, I think, depends on probably your character, probably your experience, probably sort of your personal philosophy, preferences on which approach you take, not one or, no one approach is better than the other. It really just depends. But this is a way to maybe categorize those approaches. So the first approach is more of a grassroots approach. And I would argue this is actually maybe more common in Cosmos because it is such a active, decentralized, open source culture where there are many different ways of sort of contributing in a grassroots fashion and then becoming maybe more formal down the line. But for this grassroots approach, practically speaking, they can mean open source contributions, pull requests, opening issues, just a way to show that, you're following what is happening, you're, giving feedback. There's also self-initiated projects. So this is, similar to kind of what I just showed here, a project that was put together by a community member that was tracking core contributors and their work in real time. This is something that you feel very passionate about. It could be, something that maybe you put together actually at a hackathon. It could be something in your spare time. It could be a front-end project. It could be a research report. It could be, there's really no limit. And then I would argue on-chain governance participation is also quite grassroots. So it really forces you to make, connections with, validators, community members. It really forces you to understand the Cosmos governance process. And so this is another grassroots way of really getting involved in the ecosystem, really starting to understand, who is responsible for what, and how you can make a contribution and how you can, really, succeed in this ecosystem. And then there's the top-down process as well. And if this is something that you're maybe more comfortable with, this is the standard application process. What is a company that is hiring? Are there organizations that have recently raised money, that have resources to support your career development? Does the management or do the people that work there align with your values? This is obviously the standard way that most companies operate. But then there's also always the in-between. There is the more flexible arrangements, contract work. There are also opportunities for grants. You have a partnership. You have deliverables to account for with a specific entity, but you're still independent. You still have that flexibility of moving around, maybe switching gears. And so there is that in-between, the grassroots sort of bottom-up process, and then the top-down sort of formalized hierarchical process. And I think, after everything that we've talked about so far, at the end of the day, it is what outcomes do you want to see in the world? What are the things that concern you, preoccupy you, that you are really passionate about? Maybe that is product design, maybe that is, developer relations, maybe that is marketing, maybe that is, engineering. It really depends what outcomes you want to see in the world, and really the role that you end up sort of taking on would help facilitate those outcomes. So let's say you are someone that is really interested in developer relations. Maybe the outcome you want to see in the world is just mass adoption, education, clarity of thought. You care about documentation. The outcome that you want to see in the world is, easier to understand, experiences when it comes to using this technology. And so you can get as specific as you'd like when you start to answer these questions, but it's constantly asking the what and and making sure that those outcomes and those concerns are well communicated. And this is actually something that myself and others actually at Informal practice a lot. So constantly having those discussions. What outcomes do we want to see in the world? What are the things that concern us? How do we work towards them? They can be as abstract, as far-fetched, or as specific and granular, as you'd like. And so I will actually end with this poem. This is actually only a part of the poem that I could fit onto this slide, so I really do encourage people to read this on their own time. But Peter Denning is a software engineer. This was actually published in a technical journal, I think the Computers of ACM journal. So this is actually more towards an engineer's mindset. And so when he put this together, he was reflecting on the complexity of the systems that are being built, the technical, the difficulties, the toil, the pain sometimes. And so he was reflecting, how do we get beyond these bumps, right? We come at a crossroads, we feel the pain we feel the difficulties, and so how do we acknowledge that, and how do we move forward? And really the intention behind this poem is to consider yourself a beginner in everything that you do. You might be the world expert on Tendermint, on distributed systems, on the Cosmos SDK, but inevitably there will be points where you reach an impasse, where you reach a moment where you might want to give up. And having this mindset of a beginner, almost like a childlike perspective, that there is more to discover, there's always more to learn, almost the sense of humility, I think is really powerful. So, I am a beginner, I am entering a new game about which I know nothing. I do not yet know how to move in this game. I see many other people playing in this game. This game has gone on for many years prior to my arrival. I am a new recruit. I see value in learning. So it's this idea of having a beginner's mindset, being open to novelty, to new perspectives, to new experiences, and really understanding that there is a lot more to be learned. Even if you've been around for a very long time. So I hope it's inspiring. I do encourage people to read the rest of this poem. Again, this is just one verse. So closing thoughts, Cosmos is awesome. I really do hope that some of you here today will decide to build your career in Cosmos. Again, there are always trade-offs. There are always other sort of ways of working, or other organizations, other projects to work with. But I really do think understanding how to navigate complexity, understanding how you want to work, why you want to work, what you want to work on, will definitely help you to really succeed in Cosmos and building your career in Cosmos. And if you have any questions, I'm always around and really happy to discuss any of these things further. So thank you.